Hi everyone! I'm back with another video, and as you can tell by the same shirt that I'm wearing since the last one, I'm filming several videos in one day. Today's video is my March wrap-up, which is a whole month and something overdue, but that's because I'm soon to graduate in 2 weeks, depending on when I post this. Mid-May is when I graduate, so March and April and early May were like hell, but I did manage to stuff in a lot of books despite that. I managed to read 8 books in the month of March, and that is all thanks to audiobooks. They're a real true blessing. I managed to squeeze them in like when I'm on the bus, when I'm walking, when I'm working on an art project mindlessly. It's really a lot of wasted time if you think about it. And I've been like obsessed with the library book apps since like early this year, late last year, and they've just been a godsend because it means I get to read books all the time. It saves paper, and even though I'm a slut for hardcovers, I get to read books that I want to read but don't necessarily want to purchase until I know if it's worth purchasing. So it's just like a win-win right here. We're doing good all around and reading a lot of books. Full bonus. Jumping right in, the first book that I read in March was Opal by Maggie Stiefvater. It is a like single chapter thing that was tacked on at the end of the Raven King paperback and also was released in ebook format, and I purchased it because I'm a diehard fan. Opal is a character who exists in Blue Lily Lily Blue and The Raven King, which are the third and fourth books in the Raven Cycle series. And it's just a short about Opal and, spoilers, 2 other characters, and it's a cute, fluffy little romance. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I think it sets up the Ronin trilogy that's coming, with a little kernel here and there of like potential conflicts that might arise. It's one single chapter, so it's short, it's fluffy, and there's really not much substance except to like sow a seed. I'm like not mad. I'm here for all the fuck it, I'm just gonna say the names. I'm here for all the Ronan and Adam content that I can get because I love them. They are stupid boys, and I love those stupid boys. Maggie Stiefvater's writing is just something else. She writes magical realism in a way that I've never really read any kind of like magic books yet. I'm not gonna say that she's the best magical realism author because there are a lot of Latinx and Hispanic and Mexican authors who do magical realism way better and in a far more authentic way, but Maggie Stiefvater has her own like sway with that genre, and I'm not gonna deny her that credit. I really love her writing style, and so this short was like a great little thing to read while I tide over my time waiting for the Raven Cycle. So 4 out of 5 stars, super cute. I don't think you're missing anything out if you don't read it, but what harm will come from reading a cute-ass story about Ronan, Adam, and Opal? Like, nothing. It's just wholesome. The next book that I read in March was The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, and this is a prose-style, verse-style book. She's a slam verse poet. I'm not really sure like the crossover genre there, but she writes poetry, and she does a lot of performances. If you look her up on YouTube, you will see her long list of achievements and talks and presentations that she's done, and she's just really eloquent. So The Poet X is about a young Afro-Latina girl living in New York in a very conservative Christian family, and she's trying to just find her way in the world. This book kind of explores existing in America as a young Afro-Latina woman, as a young Christian girl who's questioning her faith, as someone who's exploring her sexuality and learning about her body. It is so much content packed into this one very like intense, detailed book. I read this in audiobook in the span of like 3 hours, so it was fast. But I'm guessing the pages, if you have the physical book, are not full of words from top to bottom. It's written in verse. There's probably a stylistic way the words were placed. But it still packs a really, like, tough punch. Without the excessive detail, without the detail of a traditional novel, this book still delivers such a fleshed out story and such a fleshed out life, vibrant characters, and a very deeply emotional story. There were times while driving, which is when I was listening to this, I was crying a little bit, and that's something that, like, I didn't expect to get from this book. It's just so good. It was so good. I give it a 5 out of 5 stars, and I recommend everyone to read it. It was just so good. So the next book that I read in March is Restore Me by Tahira Mafi. I actually have this one in physical copy. The first 3 I read in audiobook in the past 2 months. I talked about them in my January and February wrap-ups. And this one I got in the mail, sat down at 11 at night, and didn't stop until I finished it at 3 a.m. Trigger warnings for panic attacks, anxiety, thoughts of suicide, alcohol abuse, mass murder, memory loss, abusive parents, transphobia, and gore. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars because I really enjoyed it. The first 3, like, you watch the growth of Tahira Mafi in her writing through the first 3 books, and the time she's taken off from Shatter Me to go to Furthermore, or to, is it Furthermore? The time that Tahira Mafi has taken off of the Shatter Me world to go into writing, like, Furthermore and Witchwood, and then coming back to Restore Me, you can see how that, like, change in genres has really affected the way she writes her books, because this is just something else. It's obviously still dystopia because it's the same fucking series, but the way she goes about describing things and talking about the world is just a little bit more magical than it was in the first 3. I just really loved seeing that change. So this book, getting to the summary, obviously follows our main cast of characters: Juliet, Warner, Adam, Kenji, Castle, and then a peppering of others a couple of days after the end of Ignite Me, is it? I forget the order. I think it's Ignite Me. The 3rd book in the Shatter Me series. And so in that sense, the characters haven't really had much of, like, a time jump or character jump. We're starting off exactly where we left off, essentially, and then we're going from there. And even in the progression of this book itself, it's like a 3 to 5 day time span. But within that short amount of time, the amount of character development that does happen for these people is astounding, because the shit that they go through is just absolutely wild. I loved seeing, like, the new characters that were introduced. Our world is starting to expand slowly. We're getting to know what happens in other parts of the globe in this post-apocalyptic dystopia world. We don't really go anywhere, but we do have characters from other places come in and, you know, interact in our small little bubble, and that really changes up the dynamics, which is super interesting to see. And the ending of this book was just... I need the next book very badly. The next book that I read in March was Obsidio, which is the 3rd book in the sci-fi installment called The Illuminate Files, written by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. So this is a uniquely formatted sci-fi fantasy book set in 200, 300 years into the future. I don't know, some large amount of time. And so we're all in space, and we're all doing fun space things. The formatting of this book, if you don't already know, is uniquely fantastic, because it is a combination of several things: sketchbook entries, chat logs, IMs, DMs, scraps of notes, video transcriptions, and then some really intense interaction with artificial intelligence. I gave this book a whopping 5 out of 5 stars because I have never read anything like this series before. I'm not a big fan of sci-fi, but I can tell you straight up that this is one of my favorite series of all time. It is rich, it is compelling, and it is fascinating. Illuminae Files is about two characters who are on an illegal planet colony, and they get attacked by Baytech, which is some kind of space megacorp. And so we're on this race against time to get away from the Baytech forces who are trying to kill off everyone on that planet, and shit just goes wild. We're following two characters in the first book. I don't even remember their names. I don't remember who's from which book, but we have two characters in Illuminae Files, two characters in Gemina, and then all four of those characters in Obsidio, plus two new perspectives. Obsidio wraps up this giant intergalactic conflict, and it's super intense and wild, and it's just so good. I don't know how they do it. Like, you'd think that reading sketches and video transcripts is dry or empty, but this book encompasses so much. It's just so good. It's so good. A couple of my complaints in general about this book series is that, like, it's fine to have, Mary Sue characters on purpose or femme fatales on purpose, because those are always intriguing characters, and I'm okay with tropes, but when I can't really discern between all three women in this book, it starts to seem like a bit of a problem, and like that's my main issue, is that it's weirdly hard if I'm not, rereading this book series to tell characters from each other. Next book that I read in March was Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. I gave this book a 3 stars out of 5. I read it I read it mostly in audiobook because I found it, and I didn't have the hard copy with me, but I have the book. So here it is to show you what it looks like. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. The book is kind of a spin-off off of Fangirl, which is another Rainbow Rowell novel. It's the character's fan fiction that she writes based off of Harry Potter. It's not exactly Harry Potter. Names are changed. The world is a little bit different, and obviously huge issues with Harry Potter itself were fixed. This book follows our characters, what are their names? Boz and Simon Snow, in their epic war against the Humdrum, who is the big bad in this book. I don't know, through the entire book, the reason I rated it 3 stars was because the entire time I was drawing parallels to Harry Potter constantly, and if things didn't line up, I kind of tended to find issue with it, but it does a good job of holding its own, and it's very unabashed and like unashamed of poking fun at itself and at Harry Potter's major like slip-ups. So I really appreciated that. The romance was like super cute, and I loved it. The characters were also fun, if a little like crass to read, but I kind of enjoyed them. Like by the end of the book, like every single one of them had grown on me, so I had fun reading it. Although I could have had more fun if there was like a little more to it. The fact that it starts in the middle of the entire like Harry Potter-ness of it, like it starts in their last year, so all of the background of it had to be fit into this one book, and even though it is a Harry Potter fan fiction, like the basis of it is very much changed for copyright reasons. So it's still a separate book, and like that caused a lot of continuity and understanding issues for me. But I enjoyed it, and it was cute and fun, and I have fangirl right there, so I'll someday get to it. I think I finally got the audiobook, so I will read the audiobook, or listen to the audiobook. Next book that I read in March was Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. This one is also an audiobook that I got. I gave this again a 3 out of 5 stars. I know I shouldn't be rating Neil Gaiman this low, but like, it just wasn't like a stellar book. It is Norse mythology stories retold the way Neil Gaiman would tell a story, and that was super fun. It's all the original stories with like a Neil Gaiman-y twist, which I don't really know what that is because this is my first Neil Gaiman book. I just, wouldn't expect Norse mythology to be written and or told the way these were. So that's why I'm saying a Neil Gaiman-y twist, like, as if I know what his twist is. It was fun to read and learn about Norse mythology through, like, Neil Gaiman's voice. He was the reader of the audiobook, so that was like a nice, like, oh yes, lull me to sleep kind of bedtime story thing, which is also another problem because I kept zoning out a lot in this book. I missed a lot of, like, gods and godly plot points, which is essential to all of this Norse mythology because every single story kind of led into the next one. Me zoning out because it was a little dry kind of inhibited my understanding of later stories. So that's why it's rated 3 out of 5 stars. But it was fun, but not the best. Next book I read in March was Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire by J.K. Rowling, and we all know that. Obviously, this gets like a 5 out of 5 stars. That rating's never gonna change, but it took me a really long time to read this book. Starting with the 4th onwards, all of the Harry Potter books get really difficult for me to read because I'm like emotionally attached to them, and all of the characters that die 4th book onwards are like, it's painful to read. So the 4th one took me a while because I had the book, I stopped reading, audiobook got returned, had to wait like a whole 2 months for it to come back. So that took a while to like finish, but I finished it. And I cried several times in the 4th book. Like, damn, I don't know how I got so emo over like the trials. In my, I think this is like my 8th or 9th reread of this series, but I'm starting to see more and more issues with like how white the series is and how hetero this series is. We've been new, but it's still like sad to see Joanne Kathleen Rowling let you down. Whatever, like, I've been diehard for too long for it to like go out the window. It's been formative in my life here in the States. The next book that I read in March was The Reader by Tracy Chee. I actually got this book 2 years ago at the Texas Teen Book Festival, and I got the book signed by the author, and I never really like finished it. I read a chapter, but then I got the audiobook and I got through the entire thing. See, audiobooks are really doing a lot for me, finishing books that I wouldn't normally finish in hard copy, so that's like a good thing. I gave this book also a 3 out of 5 stars. Nothing against it. It was just very confusing. I do like it, and I'm really excited to get to the next book, and the 3rd book should be coming out, I think, next year. So, like, I'm gonna get my hands on that book, and I'm gonna enjoy it. Premise of this book. We're following a young girl whose parents were murdered, and her aunt-ish kind of gets kidnapped. And so this girl is left on her own to figure out what this rectangular-shaped object with great power is. So in this world, no one can actually read. All of the interactions happen verbally, people learn verbally, and I guess, like, communications and transactions happen verbally, but, like, a kind of plot hole is that, like, how do you do shop signage? Symbols are still technically a way of reading, so, like, in that sense, like, there was a couple of, like, did you really think that through? But it's great. So the rectangular object that this little girl is trying to figure out is a book. And it has magical powers and things get really interesting. It weaves in the story from the book within this book and then the actual story of the reader together. So keeping those two separate, especially in audiobook format, was difficult. Hard to see in the beginning what the correlation and purpose of these things was, but it irons itself out at the end. And the story beyond this first book is really super, super interesting. I'm excited to see how that and where that goes. And that is all for my March wrap up. It was definitely a little messy because it is 1:15 a.m. when I'm filming this, and I'm a little bit off. So yeah, this has definitely been like a strange wrap up, or at least I feel strange doing it, but that's fine. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my April wrap up.